Welcome back to First Take, coming to you live from the Seaport District at Pier 17, brought to you by Chase. The Jags will host the Philadelphia Eagles in tonight's preseason game with Nick Foles facing off against his former team. He became a free agent this offseason when he declined the $20 million option offered by Philly, instead signing a 4-year, $88 million deal with the Jags. I will call that a good decision. On that note, we bring in our former quarterback, Dan Orlovsky. Hi, Dan.
What's going on?
Nothing. Hanging out. Having some deep talks, and now we're going to talk some football. Sure. I am going to start with, who wants to start on this one?
Anyone? Happy to.
All right,
I'm happy
Max,
to.
you will. Should the Eagles have doubts about letting Foles walk?
Of course. Is this a trick question? Like, putting aside for a second the realistic possibility of having both on the same team because of what you have to pay both. They both just got paid. Good for them. I get it. The NFL's set up in a way where you can't pay two guys, although I don't know that they had to pay Carson Wentz right now. Foles was going to be a free agent. Putting that aside just for a second, because things can always be arranged. Let's just look at what just happened. Carson Wentz got hurt 2 seasons ago. 13 weeks in, he was the MVP of the league, pretty clearly, in my opinion, at least. He got hurt. The Eagles were finished.
Yeah.
Except Nick Foles led them through the playoffs and all the way to the Super Bowl, where he and they beat Tom Brady and the New England Patriots. Are you kidding me? And how did he follow that up? Well, here comes Carson Wentz again. Still good. Not the same season as the year before. Gets hurt again. Not available at the end of the season. And here comes Nick Foles. He helped play him into the playoffs. There's something about him that the team plays better with, because they simplified the offense. No, the whole team likes playing with the guy. And Joe Santaloquido's excellent reporting brought that to light. It's not that Carson Wentz doesn't work hard or doesn't want to be a good leader, but he's young. He's still finding his way. Nick Foles, the locker room loves him. He juices guys. They want to play for him, with him. And Nick Foles, again, they were huge. They were heavy underdogs against the Bears. The Bears were one of the Super Bowl favorites with that defense. They went to Chicago and beat the Bears. And I'll remind everyone, they went to New Orleans, and if his receiver turns his head, they may have beaten Drew Brees and the Saints at New Orleans, which is very difficult to do. But at any rate, that's a noble, gallant title defense. Win a playoff game against one of the heavily favored teams on the road, and then go on the road to another heavily favored team and give them a game right till the end after winning a Super Bowl. That doesn't happen if you don't have Nick Foles. But all of a sudden, we're supposed to expect that because they had to do this, now they shouldn't have doubts? What, are you kidding? Of course they should.
Max, you like live in fear, and you probably overspend on insurance a little bit. Like, here's the reality. If you ask anybody in the NFL, are the Eagles legit Super Bowl contenders?
Yes.
Everyone's immediate answer is yes. For a multitude of reasons, but one of those reasons is because of the ability to re-sign a Brandon Graham, because of the ability to bring in Malik Jackson, because of the ability to trade for and then sign Deshaun Jackson or carry his salary cap. Those guys are some of the reasons why this team, right now, not last year's team or 2017 team, but this year's team right now has legit Super Bowl chances. And if you had kept Nick Foles, you don't have a Brandon Graham potential. You don't have Malik Jackson. You don't have Deshaun Jackson. And then that reduces your chances of winning the Super Bowl this year. And the reality is, so many, like, the backup quarterback is what? It's an insurance policy. And that's built off fear, like the fear that if Carson gets hurt again, what are we going to do? Like, when you go to the blackjack table, and sometimes some tables, the dealer will flip over an ace.
Yeah.
The dealer will flip over an ace. You got a bunch of money, like Stephen A. Smith money on the table. And
please.
The dealer goes, you want to buy insurance? And everyone's like, oh, you know what? Yeah, I just want to lose a little bit. And then all of a sudden, the dealer flips over like an 8, and you would have won double your money, and you sit back, and you're like, oh, man, I didn't win it all. Like the Eagles, Howie Roseman, do not construct their football organization in fear. And at some point, he decided to put his chips in this year's team and the potential of winning a Super Bowl rather than having potentially unnecessary insurance in Nick Foles.
Unnecessary?
Listen, Dan, I agree with Dan. Here's my issue. We're acting like Carson Wentz healthy couldn't do what Nick Foles did. Now, if we're saying that, that's a different argument. Nobody's saying that. Now, obviously, you, like he said, Malik Jackson, re-signing Brandon Graham, all of those guys, obviously letting go of Nick Foles and utilizing those dollars to take care of some other folks at different positions. Obviously, that was something that was paramount to them. Plus, they wanted to lock in Carson Wentz for years to come. This was a league MVP candidate. He was in line to win league MVP honors 2 years ago, okay? Last year, 5 and 6 hadn't fully recovered. ultimately incurred a couple of other injuries as well, including a fractured back, for crying out loud. That derailed him. I get that. So if you're looking at it from the standpoint of Nick Foles being that ultimate insurance policy, and that's the cause for concern, I can understand that. Monetarily speaking, the way things work in the National Football League, it wasn't to the Eagles' advantage to be able to do that. But in terms of their game, how are we sitting here acting like Nick Foles? Yes, he went 4-1. Yes, he got them a playoff victory over Chicago before they lost to New Orleans. I got all of that. But the reality is that unless you're saying that Carson Wentz, healthy, could not have done what Nick Foles did, I don't want to hear anything from anybody else. Carson Wentz is a better talent than Nick Foles.
I agree with that, Stephen A.
All right, I know you do. That's my point. So if you agree with it, understand that, again, monetary issues is why Nick Foles is gone. Ultimately, you also had to make the choice. Unless you're going to say that Carson Wentz was better than Nick Foles, which nobody will do, which no one will do, the bottom line is the Eagles made the right decisions. I don't think they should have any regrets. I don't think they will, as long as Carson Wentz can be healthy.
You don't have to say that. First of all, let me go with both of your points. Number one, I understand what they did, Dan. The reality is maybe they had to do it that way and enabled them to improve in other ways. But when you make a decision in life that like there are options on both sides that make sense, there are pros and cons. It's not like once you make that decision, even though you want to go ahead with a full heart and be committed, it's not like you're not still conflicted about things. Like the bottom line, like those things still exist, the pros on keeping Nick Foles. One of them is it's tough to say, well, sure, Carson Wentz will be available at the end of the season when he hasn't been the last two seasons. Now, that's one. Two, Stephen A., when you bring up Carson Wentz a better talent than Nick Foles. Yes, he is. Carson Wentz is an elite talent, no doubt about it. Although Nick Foles, the first time he had a real coach in the NFL or a system, went 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And then when he got back to that team, won a Super Bowl, and then made a playoff run. Nevertheless, Carson Wentz is a greater talent. But when you say if Carson Wentz would have done the same thing, no, we don't know that. We don't know if Carson Wentz could elevate under pressure in those moments. Not that he can't. We just don't know because we haven't seen him do it yet. I want to remind you quick, Dan, then I'll let you go, that Belichick, I think one of the reasons Malcolm Butler wasn't on the field in the Super Bowl, and I know you disagree with this, Stephen A., is Belichick was daring Nick Foles to beat him with his arm. They didn't want to run. They wanted to dare, and Nick Foles did. Nick Foles, with all the chips on the line in the Super Bowl, did the thing Belichick was daring him to do. I don't know that Carson Wentz could have. Maybe he can, maybe he can't, but he hasn't done it yet.
It's literally one of the most outrageous things I've ever heard in my life. But the reality also of it is this, Max. Nick Foles had a great run in that Super Bowl run last year and a really nice run at the end of last season. I love Nick Foles. But the contrary is this, that the Eagles as an organization have such a good head coach and so much talent around them that maybe some other backup quarterbacks could have had somewhat of a similar performance. But because of the coaching and the play calling style and the ability to run the football and the dominant offensive line and the weapon on the outside, is Nick Foles the only guy that could have done that? Because maybe
Dan, hold on, Max. Dan, let me help you out here, Dan. Because actually, even though you're making the right point, your argument is not as strong as it could be against Max Kellerman. Here's where you get Max Kellerman. We haven't seen Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns do a lot of things yet. Heard you raving about them. The fact of the matter is we've seen Carson Wentz perform. We didn't see him perform under the situation that Nick Foles performed under because he was hurt. But we've seen him in enough situations on a football field in the National Football League to recognize his talent and what he brings to the table. You're sitting there and saying because he wasn't in an ideal situation that Nick Foles was in, okay, that we don't know yet. But you know it about a bunch of other guys in the league you haven't seen in those situations, and you don't have no problem talking about them.
No, that's entirely wrong. I suspect
that's not entirely wrong.
Baker gives me the impression that he's going to be that kind of guy to rally.
What does the word impression mean? What's the definition of impression?
Wait a minute.
It's what you perceive.
You can get a feeling about a guy, but the point is this.
Oh, a feeling.
If the Browns just let
We have a feeling about Carson Wentz.
If the Browns just let a backup go who done it under pressure, and someone said, hey, should they be conflicted about that? I'd say, yeah, that guy did it already, particularly if Baker wasn't there at the end of the last two seasons, as Carson Wentz wasn't.
Yeah, that's what's in my head,
Max,
too, Stephen A.
But Max,
I mean, not that you guys aren't entertaining me.
But Max, the question is this. Are the Eagles at the end of the year going to go, we won the Super Bowl or we made it to the dance because of Carson? Or you know what? We kept our insurance policy, Nick Foles. He didn't have to play, but at least we kept him.
I'm hoping for the Eagles' sake, and I hate the Eagles, so I'm actually rooting against them. But if I were an Eagles fan, I would hope for their sake that Carson Wentz is healthy at the end of the year.
And they're Super Bowl contenders.
Right, but he is, and I think they will be if he's healthy at the end of the year. But given the last 2 seasons, boy, it doesn't look like the odds are in his favor.
All the insurance agents watching the show are going to hit you up because they know you just live in fear, man.
Well, the Eagles'
tried to help
premiums will
him,
be
Dan. We tried to
high
help
based
him.
on Carson
We
Wentz.
tried to
If
help
you
him.
keep getting in car accidents, guess what? Your premiums go up.
He's got the